Hi everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Southampton Business School Placement Podcast. Each episode we look at a different element of placements, from students' experiences to what employers are looking for and making yourself a competitive applicant in the placement job market. If there are any topics you'd like us to discuss, any companies you'd like us to look into, or if you want to be on the podcast yourself, please do contact us at placements.sbs@sutton.ac.uk. This week, we're joined by two of our students who were on placement last year, so I'll give them the floor to introduce themselves. So if I hand over to Tom first.
Hello, so I'm Tom. I guess we'll go into a little bit more detail, but yeah, so me and Cal both worked at the same company at Oracle, and I'm a final year student doing marketing. I guess that's kind of what needs to be said.
Yeah, and what was your role at Oracle?
I worked in consulting department.
Okay, brilliant. And Calum, yourself?
Perfect. Thank you, Tom. Yes, so as Tom said, we both worked at Oracle. I'm Calum. I'm a fourth year, so final year business management student. And I worked in the human resources department at Oracle. With Tom a lot as well.
Okay, good. And just in case anyone hasn't heard of Oracle, because they are kind of a silent business that you may not have heard of, what is it that Oracle do? Calum, I'll ask you because you worked in the HR, so you probably had to explain this a lot.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, Tom is also probably more of an expert, but Oracle, you mentioned, is they're kind of behind the scenes, so they mainly sell business to business. So it's mainly things like cloud computing, software, database solutions. I'll probably let Tom do all the technical side of this. But someone said when we started Oracle that you come across Oracle systems 7 times a day. So whether that's when you're paying at Wagamama's and things like that, or your phone, where the electricity from your phone. They're recently involved with Red Bull Racing, doing a lot of the sponsorship there, which is pretty interesting. You might have seen that. And also they're doing the Premier League football data. I think Tom, I'll pass on to Tom because you'll know as well.
It's a very good overview. I guess, it's basically a B2B tech company, which you won't know unless you have worked, because we as consumers don't use their products. We do, but we don't know. For example, Zoom, that's an Oracle product, so like things like that. So it's not got Oracle branding on it, but so it's just a big company which is in the IT sector.
Yeah, and I think that's the kind of one that I bring up to everyone who's interested in tech. They're always thinking, Microsoft, HP, and then I say, have you thought about Oracle? And they're like, what's Oracle? So I always love to have you guys talking about it, because it's such a great thing that, like you say, are using, 7 times a day, and you probably don't even know that you're coming into contact with it. That's good. Okay, so with your placements, obviously there's a long recruitment process for some people, shorter for others. So what was the recruitment process like for you overall with looking for placements, but also then, with Oracle, and how did that run for you? So Tom, if I start with you.
Yeah, so the overall, if I ignore Oracle for this bit, but the overall process of applying is, as you say, different per company. So they all have different kind of things they want you to do and things like that, but it's long in terms of, you sometimes go long periods without hearing anything, and you're not in the know and things like that, which can be a bit daunting, because you're like, they just presume they haven't wanted me or things like that. But normally it's kind of, you do like an assessment where you do just basically check your numeracy skills and literacy skills and things like that. Then normally have a phone call just to kind of get to know you as a person. Then it'll be an assessment center. So luckily for Cal and myself, we were both in-person assessment centres, but I think because of COVID, a lot of companies are now just doing online anyway, but that might change. But that was the kind of overall generic process. But for Oracle, it's a little bit different. So we had, you sent a CV and did all that, and then they gave you a call, I think it was, from one of the recruitment people, and they just asked you some questions and things like that, and if they think that you are the right fit for the company, they'll invite you to assessment center, and then they're all different depending on the role. So for me, my role, you prepare a presentation of, it's called Viral, which is basically just a pitch about yourself and why you think you suit the role, and then you have an interview. This is very relaxed Oracle process compared to some of the other more hardcore ones, like L'Oreal was quite hard. So that's for me. I'll pass to Cal, I guess. He's got different experience.
Perfect. So as you said, Tom, the experience is quite a long experience. So I remember, I think I started in the summer, sort of getting my CV ready. I wrote a list of all the companies I was going to apply for, and kind of the different stages that I'd have to try and meet. So I think that list probably had about 30 companies on. in a mix of different areas, different sectors. There's also not just one role. I was looking at different things, just generic management ones as well. So really tried to get stuck in and applying sort of come September. And that was tricky, especially with kind of uni cracking on again. But what I tried to do is send off an application a week. So maybe finding 1 or 2 hours a week and just getting one off. And then once I did that, obviously, like Tom said, some of them you just don't get through, which is fair enough. And I think a big part of the experience is bouncing back. I definitely got rejected quite a lot of times. And just as you go, you're learning more and more about what you need to do and the sort of stuff they actually want. And the sort of stuff you get used to saying, sort of program responses to different questions. And I still have that now. I use that. I'll talk a bit about it later, but I use that for my interview for my new job. So it's stuff you really learn. And then, for Oracle, I'd been rejected by an assessment centre about the week before, but I think it was really useful experience for me to sort of learn about it. I didn't really know what to expect. And so I went into Oracle kind of a lot more comfortable. The experience, as Tom said, was pretty simple. Actually, it was just 3 stages. I know some companies that I did online games and maths questions, which I'm not very good at maths, so it was quite tricky, and it seemed a bit pointless at the time. But Oracle's was pretty smooth. And then went to assessment centre. Like Tom, had to do a presentation, a final interview, and a few other things. But it was all pretty easy. And I think because I'd been rejected by one before, I felt a lot more comfortable. I knew what I was doing. There were people whose first time it was who were really nervous, where I was kind of more relaxed after that first experience. So I think we probably both had our placements wrapped up, secured by sort of February time, which was very nice. So I could relax for the rest of the year.
Yeah, to kind of refocus on the study side without having to plug that 1 to 2 hours, like you're saying, maybe a week to get that application out or prep for that assessment centre or whatever it was that you're kind of focused on that week, which is good. So it probably took you, you're looking September through to February. So not one of our earliest ones, but kind of in that mid area where we see a lot of them come through in February, because you do that application in the first semester and, like you say, maybe didn't hear back for 2 to 3 months, and then suddenly there's the next steps or a phone call or an interview, which is good. And so with that, like, how did you find the placement team, or what we provide as services, or the modules? How did that help you when you were applying? Did you use that a lot? If I go to Calum first.
Yeah, of course. So obviously you have the sort of lectures and not really seminars, but lectures. So first of all, turning up to them was really important. I definitely knew nothing about really applying for jobs and what they were looking for, even just the roles that are out there. I think what was really good was when they got old people coming in who've been on placement, who are on placement. I think hearing about the different things that people are involved with, like areas of the business like procurement, I didn't really know anything about, but found interesting. I applied for procurement roles as well. And then my placement supervisor was Rochelle. And so I had a few one-to-one meetings with her, just really sort of finding out, again, just discussing initially what I want to do, and then looking at certain companies. And she was really helpful with tips. I know she had a bit of experience with Oracle before, so we talked about that, which was really handy to have, to a little bit of insider knowledge. And just worked through her. I did a practice interview with Rochelle, and then that set me up pretty nicely. And then obviously was successful at Oracle. Yes, I don't know about Tom, if that was the same for you.
Yeah, I guess I won't say the same, but obviously although lectures and things were really useful, as I'll echo that. But the only other thing I'd say is using the student services to help with writing a CV, I found really useful. So I would do a draft and I gave it to them, and they were like, we don't like this bit, you could change this. So it's just like, because obviously as students, we've not worked properly, so we don't know what a good CV is. We don't know what they're looking for. So when you have someone who can basically say, oh, this is really good, like this part, or try and change it like this. And there's little nuances you learn, like in terms of the correct wording to use, instead of just saying, I did this, I did that, like little things like that you wouldn't know normally. So that's the only thing I'd probably add on to what Cal said.
Yeah, definitely. And that's definitely what we're here for. And like Calum's saying, with those insider tips, even if you've been to maybe a few interviews or applied for a few different jobs, like we've got students, across different industries and different roles. So when you're getting to those final stages, we can give you those tips on what maybe a particular company is looking for, if they're particularly interested in like your alignment with their culture, learning, or if they're wanting you to have good industry knowledge, or even just giving you on tips and saying, actually, have you seen that this has happened in the news recently with this company? So maybe you want to learn a bit more about that rather than just, the usual spiel. So definitely, I always recommend engaging with me. I feel like I should be like a little pen pal for all of my students, that I get the first kind of email saying, I've got this, and then I can like help kind of lead you through that maze. But yeah, that's brilliant, and glad that you found that really helpful. So you kind of both secured your roles in kind of February time. You had a bit of time to think about it before you started in the summer. So what were your kind of expectations in going into a placement, or maybe specifically a placement with Oracle in consulting and HR? And how did those kind of measure up or compare to the reality once you got into the placement? And I'm aware you guys were on placement during COVID, so that's a big one that comes up as well. So if I go to Tom first.
Yeah, so I knew about Oracle as a company before I applied, which is not that common because, as we mentioned, they're not a well-known company, because my parents work in the same industry, not in Oracle, but in the same industry. Mm-hmm. So I knew kind of what the company did. So, and I also knew that I wanted to do consulting. So my expectations were what a consultant would do, where they go to client offices. A generic consultant normally spends more time at a client's office away from the actual company office. So I was expected to travel a lot, work on projects, get stuck into, all the cool stuff which a consultant might do. However, as you mentioned, COVID completely changed that. So I was a bit, when it happened, I was a bit disheartened, because I knew that I wouldn't get to experience what a consultant would do. But what I actually found in reality was I was involved in the transition of basically the shift in landscape of consulting. It's corporate wording, but basically because they had to just change overnight the way they do it. So they had to just basically do everything they did in person over Zoom or over the phone and things like that. So that actually was really interesting and really beneficial for me, because I got the experience and I was learning on the job as well as everyone else was. So it was kind of like a progressive thing as a team. And the only thing I would say in terms of, for me, because of COVID, as I mentioned, consultancy had to change. They weren't sure if my job, they could need me, because obviously they didn't know what was going to happen. So I basically got my placement got cancelled because of COVID about a month before, and then it got put back on. But so there's the reality was very different to what I expected, but it was actually in some ways I think better for me, because I was involved in that initial moving on in terms of COVID.
Yeah,
I think that's about it.
Yeah, and Calum, how did you find maybe expectations of going into a placement and HR and Oracle, and how that compared to once you got there working with them?
Yeah, so obviously, like Tom, sort of knew that we were probably going to be working from home for at least the start of our placement. It did end up being the whole placement, which was quite scary. I mean, I'd never had a proper kind of corporate job. I'd done work experience, but kind of working from home, and obviously not being in the office, which would have been, I think, quite a big thing. But as such as the nature of what was happening, it just wasn't realistic. So definitely a little bit nervous. Sort of wasn't really sure what to expect. Again, I hadn't actually heard of Oracle before I applied. My mum told me to apply for them, and I was like, oh, I've never heard of them. Like, I'm not sure, like, that's the sort of companies I'm applying for, but I'm really glad I did. And then in terms of my role, I'd done a module called Human Resource Management in second year that I found pretty interesting, which is part of the reason I applied for some HR roles. So I had a bit of an idea, but it's kind of all what you learn at uni. It's not necessarily putting it into practice. And that was something really interesting. And like Tom said, just sort of going through that culture change. And I think that was something that was really interesting to me being in HR, is how can you look after employees and support them when they're working from home? Again, such a dramatic change. So things like wellbeing initiatives were really big. I'm sure Tom and I will talk about what we did a little bit later on. And then also, I've done my DIS on wellbeing in technology firms during the pandemic. So it's really set me up for this year as well, the stuff I've learned. And I would say working from home for a year, I did have a great year still. I lived in Reading with other interns, saw a lot of Tom actually as well. And still really enjoyed my year. So I think working from home it doesn't hinder the experience you have at all. And it is very nice to be flexible now. Like if you wanna have Fridays at home and relax, that's now not relaxed, but you kind of have it slightly more chill. It is possible. So it was a really good year.
Yeah, and I think both of you were in roles that were quite changed quite a lot during, having to move to a hybrid way of working or just working from home. Consulting is very much about client-facing work, and HR, like you said, how do you support a whole kind of workforce of people whilst they're all working from home and you can't physically see them or see maybe those touch points in the corridor or at the staff room where someone's maybe not doing so well. So you kind of talked about it a bit there, but I know that you two got involved in a project kind of additionally to your role. So do you want to tell me a bit more about what you got involved in with Oracle? Go back to Calum, because you did kind of start off talking about it.
Yeah, of course. So sort of Tom and I early on in the year had sort of discussions about what we could do and what we were interested in. And we sort of both found probably around the time of November, we both have been doing that for the last few years. So we talked about that, and it's obviously very much around men's mental health. So that's kind of an idea that we thought, why don't we do something around men's mental health and trying to promote that? Oracle is a very sort of conservative, traditional company. There's a lot of kind of old men who maybe are kind of more resistant to change, and maybe wouldn't understand that obviously mental health is now such a massive thing, especially when you're working from home for a year. So we had this idea. We gauged it with the wellbeing lead as well as our intern manager, and it's just started from there really. And we ended up doing a podcast, and I'll let Tom go into all the details, but it kind of just started as an idea outside of work, within work, but not in our day-to-day jobs, and sort of went from there. I'll let Tom talk a little bit about what the podcast was like and stuff, so I'll just pass on now.
Yeah, so I don't know about other companies, but the thing I'll just say before I start talking about it is Oracle is very good for allowing you to explore passions which you are interested, as long as obviously you can still do your work, obviously, because that's what we're paid for. But so Cal and I shared an interest in a lot of things, but one of them was mental health. So as he said, we pitched him. Basically, we created what I'm very proud of. I think Cal is as well, but I was very proud of the piece we produced because we got lots of people. So, for example, the head of UK consulting emailed me directly to say, this is really good. Thank you for sharing this. I'm going to share this with my younger sons who are similar age to me and Cal. So stuff like that just shows that you can make an impact, because obviously there's the whole perception, you're just an intern kind of saying, but little things like that just really makes you just feel like proud, and obviously it's something you're interested in. But in terms of what we did in the podcast, we had myself and Cal kind of talking from the perspective of a student 18 to 25 kind of age gap, because we quickly identified different age groups, first of all, completely different situations in life, have different exposures, but also completely different perceptions. As Cal mentioned, older people may be like, I'm not so sure what this is. And kind of, it's a bit of a taboo topic we found. So we had our age group where we talked about our experiences. We had a 40-ish-year-old man with 2 young kids, and how having younger kids has impacted his mental health as well, things like that. And then a 65 and up person who's lived a long time, and how that's kind of impacted him as well, being in COVID and stuff. So with his mental health, I just found it really interesting. And it was one of the projects, it's one of the highlights of my year for sure. And it's something that we're now known for, me and Cal, because I still work at Oracle. So I still get stuff talked to about the mental health stuff we did, which is good.
Oh, good. And it is so nice to feel like you're kind of making an impact, whether that's in your job or whether it's an additional kind of project, like you say, to those daily responsibilities or monthly kind of tasks that you have, having the kind of opportunity to explore that and have that kind of nurtured by your workplace is really, really good. So you've kind of just answered my next question, Tom, because I was going to ask what the highlight of your placement, would you say the highlight of your placement year was being able to get involved in that project, or was there something else within your consulting role that was kind of a high point as well?
So it's definitely that the mental health podcast is one of the highlights. Another one was I got to work on another outside of my job project, which was basically building a sustainability dashboard. So I came up with the idea. I thought there was a little gap linking consultancy based projects and what you deliver to a client and sustainability, because lots of more companies are becoming more sustainable and wanting to become more sustainable. So I pitched the idea. So I won't repeat obviously about the men's mental health, but that probably was. But the other one was maybe in terms of outside my job was this sustainability, where I kind of pitched an idea to the a global sustainability manager and kind of worked with senior architects in consulting and basically built this thing. It was really cool. And then now it's out there for companies to use. So lots of companies now use the system, which I didn't build, but I was involved with the production of, which was quite cool. Yeah. So another thing where you kind of involved.
Yeah, the initial idea came from you. So it's nice to see like that tangible outcome that comes out. So Calum, what was the highlight of your year with Oracle?
Yeah, so same as Tom, the men's mental health kind of outside of the day job was probably the favourite. But in terms of my role, I think sort of working internationally, I helped do it for Ireland as well. Helped run the Ireland kind of HR systems. And then one big thing I was really involved with is running assessment centres. So for next year's interns. So I helped run, I think, I can't remember how we did in the end, about 15 to 20 assessment centres. And it was just really interesting being the other side of the table. And I actually think it really helped me for applying at jobs this summer. So working with the recruiters to see kind of what they're looking for in terms of jobs. And I think just being the other side, it was just really fun. Tom came and sat with me on some of them when he was free. I'm sort of speaking to all the people who are applying about their experiences. It's just really interesting, and I think helping run that was quite rewarding as well. And you sort of get to see the communications when people get offered the job, and you're obviously really chuffed because it's hard work. So I think being involved with that was the highlight as well.
Yeah, so being on the other side of that must have given some good tips for coming back to final year and obviously looking beyond that in the next steps in your career. So Tom, you mentioned you've still been working for Oracle in your final year. So how's that been and what have you been involved in?
So so my placement was I was in the consulting support role. So it's kind of just a holistic consulting role where I was kind of just a bit involved with everything. And there was an opportunity in the latter months of my year where a team needed a little bit of help. So I just kind of helped. And then from that, they offered me to stay full-time over summer, which was really nice. I got paid. And then part-time during university. So it's a slightly different role. So I moved sideways into bid management. So basically, instead of doing the implementation of stuff for clients, I'm basically doing, I have all the records of all the deals we're on at the moment. So all the cool names and company names which people are interested in. So I work on that. So it's been good. It's been really good because I mean, as I say, money, but that's not the main reason. I enjoy my role and I enjoy having the set structure is the one thing I'd say. So when you go from uni to a 9 to 5, it's a shock because you're not used to it. And then I know friends who have gone back from placement to uni and thought, I have way too much time. How did I think I was busy in second and first year? Because you're used to 9 to 5. So during all of semester one, I was 4 hours a day, every day of the week. And I was doing that until the end of February. So just this month now in March, I've reduced it because I finished at the end of this month so I can just tidy up my dissertation and things like that. But I'm now 2 days a week. So it has been really good for me. It has been busy, but it's been really good. And also a little bit of income on the side of uni is always really useful. You can do more things that you want to do. So that's good.
Yeah, and Calum, so kind of getting involved in seeing the other side of recruitment, has that helped you in going forward? Because I know that you've secured or kind of gone forward and in the realms of securing your role for after you graduate. So how has that been?
Yeah, so first thing was it kind of my role really helped my dissertation. As I mentioned earlier, I think that's something to mention. It's way easier for me to interview people. I literally just speak to my friends. So I interviewed Tom as part of my dissertation, and that made it a lot easier. So it's quite handy in sort of getting there. And then just applying for jobs. I'd obviously had the experience before, so I sort of knew what the process was going to be like, what rejections like as well. And sort of I know what worked for me last time. So it was a very similar process, sort of doing the odd video interview, a few sort of online tests. I had sort of 2 assessment days, kind of virtual ones, and then got Vodafone, got one of them. It was a virtual assessment day, so not something I'd done before, but something I was very much used to, especially after kind of the Oracle ones. And it was pretty smooth. I think I got the job secured sort of in January time. So again, it's really nice now that I can sort of enjoy the last few months of uni, get my diss in, and then really relax and enjoy my summer before I start. I've still got one, like I said, one more assessment centre, which I'll do. But it's nice to have that option and choice. So it's a big relief to know that I've got a job in September and I can just enjoy summer and kind of really enjoy my last few months at uni. And that's, I think, a big part of the reason I've got that job is through my placement year. and the experiences that I had, and sort of being confident speaking on a camera, on a computer to people you've never met. So it's just things like that you really, really build on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing I would take most from that, and a lot of people don't like to talk about it, is the rejection element, because rejection is unfortunately just a part of life and part of applying to placements, jobs, graduate roles, and all of that. So having that kind of placement recruitment experience where maybe you didn't get past the first part of the recruitment process, never got that thing back, or got the generic email, and you can kind of now, going forward to grad roles, like brush that off a little bit more easily. It's not personal. It's just that, we see some of the numbers that come through, and I'm sure you did in HR, like Calum, the application numbers that come through, then how many you can take forward. Unfortunately, some parts of that have to be a bit impersonal, and getting on later, then you can get that feedback and maybe take that on to the next role. But rejection, unfortunately, is just part of the process. So once you learn that and realize it's not personal, and you can take that into the next application, then it becomes a lot easier. Okay, so from all of your wonderful experiences on placement, through your part-time job in your final year and getting your grad role, what would you say each is maybe one top tip for a student either looking for a placement or maybe on placement right now? How can they make the most out of that year? I'll start with Calum. What would be your one top tip?
My one top tip, especially if you're on placement, is get involved with everything. I think network as much as you can, meet as many new people. I tried to meet one new person every week on placement, which was advice that someone gave me. Just get stuck in with projects. That's how you meet a lot of the people. You've obviously got a small team probably, but you meet so many people and network with so many people through doing other projects. So just get as involved as you can. And that's how I feel like I got the most out of my year. It definitely helped me grow in confidence massively, meeting new people. I look back, and Tom and I's highlight is both something we did that's not our day job, which I think is pretty good. It shows that getting involved with other stuff is also really good and really enjoyable, and you can take a lot away from that.
Yeah. And Tom, one top tip for anyone on placement or looking for a placement, what would you say?
I guess for people who are looking for placement, the one thing I'd say is, links to where me and Cal worked, is don't just go for names of companies. There's some really, really, really fantastic companies out there. Some of them startups, but some of them you've never heard of. Yeah. But don't just dismiss them. So, like, for example, me and Cal both worked at Oracle, which is not a very well-known company in terms of students. So essentially, but we both had a really good time. And then also, just to follow on from what Cal said, networking is probably the one thing I'd say while on placement. For example, I was telling Chloe earlier, I got an email from someone who I did a project with while on placement this week, and he basically offered me an interview to a job to work in his team from it. So people do remember things. Like, you're not just an intern, you are deserving to be in the role. Like, they listen to you, they do appreciate what work you're doing. Networking is the one I'd say for that as well.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the students that come back off placement say the networking or the people they've met on placement have been so beneficial. And I think the one thing, I guess, ironically is the wrong word, but going into placement, a lot of the worry that students have is the imposter syndrome thing, where it's like, well, why would that person want to talk to me? Or why would I be able to talk to like the head of wellbeing about a thought we've had, or sustainability dashboards or things? But actually going in as an intern, you're there with responsibilities, get involved. They're there to develop and nurture kind of your point of view and your learning. And those are all things that maybe they've not thought about because you're coming in with that fresh set of eyes. So going in with those ideas that can then lead to dashboards, fruitions. The feedback you're getting on the podcast is absolutely brilliant. So it's difficult. Imposter syndrome is not fun, but I think what is coming back from all our placement students is that they've had some great experiences from the networks they've built with those other people that maybe you're thinking wouldn't want to hear from you, but they definitely do. Well, that's everything, guys, and thank you for kind of volunteering your time and talking to me about your experiences and where you're going next and how your time at Oracle has kind of shaped your final year and future. So thank you for that. And as always, as I said at the top of the podcast, if there is anything you would like us to cover, any companies you'd like us to speak to, or if you'd like to get involved in the podcast yourself, then email us at placements.sbs@sutton.ac.uk, and we'll see you in the next episode.